Good morning. I hope you had a great evening. So I got to tell you about my evening. So I was trained as an urban geographer and planner originally. So I'm very interested in historic districts. So after I did my email, take a little wander around to the historic district, and I couldn't figure out why every bar and restaurant was full at 7 o'clock. It just didn't make sense to me. It seemed like awfully busy, and I was trying to figure out, well, maybe there's something going on at the university or the legislature or something. I go back to the hotel. I'm sitting in the bar. I'm having shrimp and grits. I'm having the whole South Carolina experience, right? And the bartender said, do you want to go to the Carrie Underwood concert? I said, you got to be kidding. Now I explain why all the bars are full. And so I got a free ticket to Carrie Underwood. So you people go to enormous lengths to make Scottish, Canadian, Californians feel welcome. So thank you. It was a great evening. Fantastic. And I was Facebooking my family and getting things back like, have you lost your mind, or is this a midlife crisis? Or it was me and 10,000 South Carolina co-eds and their moms. It was great. So that was all fun. We had a great day yesterday, and I learned a tremendous amount. I want to just sort of connect the themes quickly here and maybe tell you one story about my experience as a patient. I think Terry's really powerful story was about the system being important, particularly the system defaulting to error if we're not careful and correcting that. And Josh really gave us a powerful addition to that, not a disclaimer to it, but an addition, which was, yeah, but people and their behavior matter too. So we really got that yin and yang of what causes mistakes, harm, error, and all the things that we're trying to prevent. So I wanted to just underscore, though, the importance of what it's like to be on the other end of this, right? And Bill Berry talked about this in the breakout, having been a patient. So my story is interesting. It's interesting to me. It may not be riveting for you, but it's interesting to me. 10 years ago, I had a very serious medical problem. My golf game collapsed. Now, if you're Scottish, that is a serious medical problem, right? So how it happened was I was on a plane going to New York, and I used to carry a big garment bag on my shoulder, and I put it in the overhead bin, and I sort of did the one-handed macho, pull it out, catch it in the air trick. And what I'd done, it turns out, was herniated a disc in my neck as C5, C6, right? Now, I didn't know that. All I knew that the only real symptom was that my golf game was pathetic, right? I just couldn't hit. Felt like tingling every time it was awful, absolutely awful. So my wife, who's a former emergency room nurse, she said, you need to go and see your doctor, and he'll fix your golf game. It sounded plausible to me. So I went to see my doctor, my primary care doctor. At the time, because I live in Menlo Park, California, and I was going to the Menlo Clinic, which is part of Stanford, my primary care doctor was a double board certified endocrinologist, right? Because that's the only kind of primary care doctors you can find in Palo Alto. Anyway, so he sent me for an MRI, right? Now, what a thrill for a Scottish Canadian to have an MRI, right? It's easier for Canadians to win an Olympic gold medal in figure skating than it is to get an MRI. Nobody in Canada has ever had an MRI, right? So I had the MRI, and then my doctor said, I'm sending you for a consult to Stanford to neurosurgery. I said, what? Anyway, so I go to the consult. I go in the room, the gown thing and all that. And this kid comes in, and nice young man, and he said, I'll be your doctor. I said, really? He said, yeah, I think you're going to need an operation. I said, hold the phone, chum. I said, I'm a health economist. I'm not having surgery. That's not what this is about. I'd done through all the traction and all that stuff. None of it worked. And I said, look, who are you? And he said, I'm the neurosurgery resident. I said, oh, really? Where are you in your training? How much longer do you have? 7 years. I said, oh, that'll be brilliant. So I'm really paying attention to him. So we're having this debate back and forward. And next thing I hear, the door knocks, and in comes this guy, short guy, good-looking, bushy eyebrows. Now, I'm on to him and he said, I'm Dr. Schur, I'm the chief of neurosurgery. It turns out he was also the chief of medical staff at the time at Stanford. Now, the bushy eyebrows got me, right? Because when I was in my second year at college, I figured it out, that the professors with bushy eyebrows and small writing were much smarter, right? And this is gender independent, by the way, right? So I'm on to him now. I said, yeah, you're my guy. So he put the MRI up. Now, look, I could be a radiologist. It's not that complicated. You can see the wee white lines don't line up, right? And when the wee white lines don't line up, there's something badly wrong, okay? So he said, now this is not what he said, but this is what I heard as a patient. He said, we might be able to fix this, but what we do is we cut your throat, we go in, we take out the disc, and we replace it with a piece of dead Uncle Frank, right? And then we bolt it together with a screw. Now, that wasn't his precise language, but that's what I heard as a patient, right? So I go back to see my wife, and I explain to her, I'm going to have surgery. And she goes, oh, for God's sake. She's Canadian, too, which is the other thing. She said, what do you expect? He's a surgeon. He's going to recommend surgery. We're going to go and see a neurologist, and this time I'll come with you, okay? So I go to see the top neurologist, the guys that look after the 49ers, the most conservative neurologists, or he's part of a sports medicine group. And the guy's got a rubber hammer, right? That's all he's got is a rubber hammer. I was hoping for something a wee bit more high-tech than that, right? But he gets me, you know, and he's banging my knee and touching my toes. Do you feel this? Do you feel that? And he said, look, not only are you going to have the surgery, you're going to have it on Monday. He said, because if your neck's very unstable right now, and if you get hit in a car crash or get rear-ended, you could be in serious jeopardy. Now, you cease to be a health economist. You cease to be some smart aleck. You become a terrified human being, right? That's what it's like. I mean, and this was, I know this is trivial to all of you. It was a big screaming deal to me. So I get admitted to Stanford, and, you know, it all went fine. I was in on a Monday. I was out on a Tuesday. But I have to tell you, it's mystifying as a patient that you go through all this stuff, and it seems like every hour somebody comes in and says, I'm your nurse. And I go, like, what happened to the other people? Well, I had a nurse. Where did she go? So, and nobody explains this to you. And so I describe my patient experience at Stanford as islands of clinical excellence surrounded by the Department of Motor Vehicles, right? I mean, how anyone gets out of the place alive is beyond me, because the opportunities for error are enormous. There's so much complexity. There's so many transitions. There's so many different pieces to it. Now, I'm not making fun of it to be mean. I think it's inherently complicated, right? I think it's unbelievably complicated. When we say it's like every other industry, it's not. It's very complicated, and you're dealing with very frightened people, right? So that makes the stakes all the higher. By the way, I talked to a bunch of my Scottish doctor friends about if I'd had the same experience in Scotland, would they have done surgery to fix my golf game? And my Scottish doctor friend said, no, son, they would have told you to play from the white tees and putt better, you know, which is actually wonderful advice. So what's this all got to do with patient safety? Well, I think you have to bring in the perspective of the frightened patient. And why, I was really impressed in that discussion with Bill Berry's group yesterday about the role of checklists and how to get people to come along with all of that, because it seems to me that that's one way to make all this stuff safer, right? And Atul, I think, has done an amazing job, not only in the US, but around the world, in galvanizing people that checklists can make a difference. But one of the issues that came up in that meeting yesterday was the difficulty of getting, you know, to be frank, crusty old surgeons to play the game, right? I mean, that's a problem with a lot of this, because physicians rightly, you know, cling to many of the things that they did in their training. Remember, I talked about yesterday the resistors. That's a big segment, and it tends to be, the demographics of that segment of resistors tends to skew more to procedure-oriented specialties. So that's where the resistance to evidence-based medicine, where the resistance to guidelines and standards in terms of all the questions we ask doctors. So part of what we have to do is find a way to get people who don't normally work together in a way that they follow orders, because doctors are sort of trained to make decisions by themselves in the middle of the night. They don't do team real well. They don't do group real well. And yet, a lot of this patient safety activity requires people to get along, and we have to mediate between different interests, different professions, different priorities, different specialties. So that's the segue really to our speaker this morning, Moshe Cohen. And Moshe knows better than most that we need to seek consensus before we can work together in perfect harmony, to pick up on the musical theme. Moshe has mediated nearly 500 disputes for businesses, government agencies, and nonprofit organizations. He has a company called The Negotiating Table, and he can show you how to resolve disputes in a cost-effective, private, and an efficient manner that leaves control of the outcomes in your hands. I mean, it's a real skill set that he brings. He's been an instructor in these topics, and his experience spans from working with large corporations with employees numbering in the tens of thousands down to small businesses and startups. We were just talking about his experience with neighbors of mine in Palo Alto, working with some of the prestigious Silicon Valley leaders. He has a really interesting background. He is a recovering robotics engineer who fell in love with mediation, right? He holds a degree in physics from Cornell, a master's degree in electrical engineering from McGill, and an MBA from Boston University. And he also teaches negotiation and leadership in the MBA program at Boston University, and a course on mediation in the workplace at Boston University and Cambridge College. He's done a lot of work with IHI, is a fan of this community, and please join me in welcoming Moshe Cohen.